much for joining us. Just time for a quick recap of the week, and we begin in Saudi Arabia, the Mecca of Meccas. This week, President Obama visited Saudi Arabia for a summit of Gulf leaders, but right from the moment he arrived, it seemed something was a little off.
The king did not greet Mr. Obama at the airport, instead sent a lower-level delegation.
He was met at the airport when he got off his plane by the governor of Riyadh, who is a royal, but is not, is not a senior figure in the government.
Oh, that is a snub. You send a governor to meet the President of the United States? Just imagine if King Salman arrived in America and was greeted at the airport by Arizona Governor Doug Ducey. That would not be acceptable, even if he was moonlighting as a limo driver. And just in case the snub was not clear enough, the Saudi king had been shown on television earlier in the day greeting the leaders of neighbouring states at the airport. Which is like finding out your parents didn't forget to pick you up from soccer practice. They showed up, bought an ice cream for a bunch of other kids, and then intentionally left without you. It does seem pretty clear at this point. The Saudis cannot wait until this president leaves office.
They believe that only the next president, whether it's Hillary Clinton or even Donald Trump, will be able to restore Saudi Arabia's status as America's key ally in the Mideast.
That actually makes sense if you think about it. Donald Trump has a lot in common with the Saudis. They both inherited wealth, hate neighbouring countries, and have a decorating style best described as King Midas and Elvis designer brothel. But despite all this tension, the president tried to smooth things over during his speech at the conference, although, judging by the camera work on the Saudi newsfeed, it may not have gone over great.
When we look back on the past year, a lot has gotten done. I'm confident that a year from now, we will be able to say that because of these actions, all of our nations are more peaceful and more secure and more prosperous. And it underscores the enduring friendship and partnership.
Wow! It's like the camera actually said, "Oh my God, Obama, shut up! You are so boring!" So let's move on to the UK, the country that gave the world the Beatles and then punished it with Coldplay. The UK also got a visit from the president this week, although their royals gave him a somewhat warmer welcome.
The Queen herself, in an extraordinary gesture of friendship, coming out with Prince Philip to greet the Obamas.
94-year-old Prince Philip even drove them to lunch.
I have never been driven by a Duke of Edinburgh before, and I can report that it was very smooth riding.
Sure. Although, let's be honest, any ride with a 94-year-old man behind the wheel that doesn't end with your skull shattered against a tree counts as a smooth ride. And those were not the only royals greeting the Obamas on this visit.
A royal handshake from little Prince George, up past his bedtime to meet the president. The toddler in a spa robe, matching pajamas and slippers, all of it shared on the young royal's Twitter feed. That robe, OMG, so sweet, one follower wrote, and the most adorable display of a power dynamic ever.
Is it, though? Is it? Because I would say it's a little demeaning for the president to have to crouch down and greet a toddler dressed as Hugh Hefner. Although, to be fair, this trip was not all royal photo ops. The president also spoke out in favour of Britain staying in the EU, something that enraged London's Mayor Boris Johnson, and he did not hold back.
In an article for a right-wing tabloid, Johnson slammed Obama for taking a bust of Winston Churchill out of the Oval Office. Johnson wrote that Obama was compelled to oppose the UK due to, quote, the part Kenyan president's ancestral dislike of the British Empire.
Holy shit! Or to put that another way, he may not like us because of our history of racism, Boris Johnson said racistly. And I'll say this, it's a little hard to hear a man reduce Obama's views to him being part Kenyan when that man is himself clearly part Cabbage Patch Kid. And lastly this week, we turn to Norway, the left testicle in the frigid sea penis of Scandinavia. Norway's current government has come in for criticism recently for its response to the Syrian migrant crisis, which has included drafting an asylum policy they call one of Europe's toughest and deporting nearly 10,000 people since the beginning of last year. This has been overseen by their Immigration Minister, Sylvie Listhaug, perhaps the most Norwegian-looking human being who has ever lived. And this week, in an attempt to soften her image, she travelled to the Mediterranean and jumped into the water to experience what it was like to be a migrant, which already sounds stupid, and then you see what she was wearing.
Er klar?
Ja, det klart. Det bare opp. Sånn.
OK. I think the most ridiculous part of this stunt is that this looks genuinely pleasant. I would happily spend my next vacation gently floating in the Mediterranean in a giant pumpkin suit. Although Listhaug did insist that she had learned something from this experience.
Safely on board the boat again, Listhaug has a new perspective.
To see a boat like this when you're drowning, that must be amazing.
Yeah, but how is seeing a boat when you're drowning is nice something you did not already know? And for the record, that is not drowning, that's floating around giggling dressed like an aquatic Cheeto. And listen, there is no doubt European policymakers need a better understanding of the dangers faced by migrants and refugees. And if belly flopping around the Mediterranean like a dolphin on Quaaludes helps you do that, maybe it's a good thing. Because for the record, until now, Listhaug has been pretty tone-deaf on this issue. Back in November, she justified Norway's decision to turn refugees away by invoking Jesus.
I think that Jesus would see that we have to help as many as possible. That was what Jesus was concerned with, that you should help as many as possible, and that's not about helping many in Norway.
Oh, OK. Obviously, she's living by one of Jesus' most remembered sayings, do unto others as you would have others do unto you, often not applicable in Norway, a country that does not exist yet. And now, this.
And now, everyone likes mispronouncing Target.
Target? Or should I say Target?
Of course, our sophisticated Vicky says Target. What do you think, Vicky?
Yes, Target. Target.
I think they're an upscale Target.
Target.
That's Target.
Some people call it Target, of course.
That's right. You remember Target.
Well, it used to be Target. I think it might be back to Target now.
Well, everyone was crazy about Target or Target.
They are a long way from Target.
It doesn't have the Target cachet that it once had.
Our next one from Target. Target, as we like to say.
Exactement. How do you feel about your store being called Target?
Oh, I love to hear that, Gail.
Moving on. Our main story tonight concerns Puerto Rico, the island that for decades has been marketed to us as a beautiful vacation spot.
This is the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, a land of song and laughter. Coconut milk, that delicious Puerto Rican rum. This is really living. It's the revival of an old coconut mask festival at Louisa, just 45 minutes from San Juan. And how'd you like to see this the morning after?
Wait. Did that 1950s narrator just make a sex joke? Why, if you've got the moxie, you can fuck every crazy masked stranger on the island. But Puerto Rico is an island of 3.5 million people, and they are currently facing a horror even greater than a demonic Slipknot coconut mask.
Puerto Rico is in desperate financial trouble.
Puerto Rico is facing a $70 billion public debt amid a 10-year economic crisis.
Considering the state of our economy, the debt is not payable. This is not politics. This is math.
That is bad, because this is math is one of the most dread-inducing sentences in the English language, even when it's uttered at the start of an actual math class. As foreboding statements go, it's right up there with "it'll never grow back" and "Mommy, Whiskers has been napping for a really, really long time." Puerto Rico is currently around $70 billion in debt, and it is wreaking havoc on the island.
The poverty rate is a staggering 45%. And last year alone,
over 80,000 people left for the mainland U.S.
Puerto Rico has already shut down more than 150 schools. In the last few years, the cash-strapped government has dramatically hiked sales taxes from 7% to 11.5%, far higher than any in the United States.
Yes, right now, Puerto Rico is like the last Tower Records. Everything's overpriced, everyone's being laid off, and there's still a weirdly large number of Ricky Martin CDs. And remember, Americans have a personal stake here. Puerto Ricans are American citizens, and they and their descendants include some of our finest judges, both of our laws and our idols. There's some of our top athletes and our top Guzmans. Just this week, Lin-Manuel Miranda, the son of Puerto Rican parents, won the Pulitzer Prize for Hamilton, the Broadway smash he created and stars in. And last month, he made a heartfelt plea to Congress on Puerto Rico's behalf.
If I can leave you with anything today, our island is in crisis, and if I can help in any way, if I can get more eyeballs to this crisis, it's a fixable problem.
I'm urging Congress, if Hamilton tickets will help, I'm happy to do that too.
Wow. That is incredible, because I'm amazed even he can get tickets. It is easier for a meerkat to get into Harvard Law School than it is to get into that show. And quick side note here, Congress should take him up on that. The show is amazing. Have you seen that clip from when he performed a work-in-progress version of the opening song at the White House?
Well, the word got around. They said this kid is insane, man. Took up a collection just to send him to the mainland. Get your education, don't forget from whence you came. And the world is gonna know your name. What's your name, man? Alexander Hamilton.
It's so fucking good! It's so good! We owe Puerto Rico for that man. So how did we get to the point where members of Congress are being offered Broadway tickets to save Puerto Rico? Well, much of it has to do with the fact that, as we have talked about before here, Puerto Rico is not a state, but rather, as a 1901 Supreme Court case stated, it is a territory that is foreign to the United States in a domestic sense. Which sounds like what a liquor store clerk says to try and sell surplus cases of Miller High Life. Oh, you're looking for a quality foreign beer? I'd call this foreign in a domestic sense. And look, we don't need to settle tonight the question of Puerto Rican statehood. That is a complicated issue on which many Puerto Ricans themselves disagree. But one thing is for sure, because it's a territory, many laws that apply to the states have loopholes concerning Puerto Rico. And as you will see time and time again in this piece, those little legal quirks have had massive consequences. Some good, but many utterly devastating. And let's start with a quirk many Puerto Ricans liked, something called Section 936. It gave tax breaks to encourage businesses that would otherwise have moved overseas to move to Puerto Rico, and it worked.
In the 1970s, the U.S. government helped attract business to Puerto Rico by granting generous tax breaks. That led to a booming manufacturing sector, particularly pharmaceutical companies. At its peak, the island was home to 89 drug manufacturing plants.
All of a sudden, Puerto Rico was a pharmaceutical paradise. At its peak, the small city of Barceloneta even housed 14 pharmaceutical and other plants, including one that produced Viagra. And that Viagra plant was such a source of pride that the town's mayor has said, we're responsible for a lot of good moments. Which is one step away from outright changing the town's motto to Barceloneta, you're welcome for that boner. Now, unfortunately for Puerto Rico, Congress got rid of those tax breaks to offset a tax cut on the mainland, phasing them out completely by 2006. And between that and the US recession, Puerto Rico lost over half its manufacturing jobs, putting its economy into a flaccid state that no amount of Viagra could fix. And to pay its bills, the government started issuing tons of municipal bonds. And a municipal bond is basically an IOU. Puerto Rico borrows money from someone, promising to pay it back later with interest. And for years, people lined up to buy those bonds because, thanks to some other quirks in the law, they were very attractive.
Congress decided bonds from Puerto Rico would be triple tax exempt. Those who buy them don't have to pay federal, state, or local taxes on the bonds.
The money you earned on them was triple tax exempt. anywhere in the US, and triple is the best you can have. Like triple fudge brownies. Because double fudge is shit, and quadruple fudge doesn't even exist, because what would the fourth fudge be? Now, Wall Street loved those tax breaks, as well as the fact that thanks to yet another legal quirk that they themselves lobbied for, they could stash tons of bonds in funds without putting Puerto Rico in the name. You might even own Puerto Rican bonds and not even know it. Oppenheimer's Maryland Municipal Fund, for instance, is made up of 50.4% Puerto Rico bonds, which is insane, because if you are more than half something, that is what you should be called. Even Taco Bell makes sure their ground beef is less than 50% squirrel lips. And that's because, as we all know, the rest is a combination of raccoon dicks and weasel knees. And yet, Puerto Rico even went a step further to entice Wall Street, writing into its constitution language suggesting that certain bondholders would be paid first ahead of anything else, including funding basic government services, which is pretty fucked up. The US owes $1.2 trillion to China, but if you called 911, you would not expect them to say, "Oh, I'm sorry, we chose to send our fire truck money to Beijing. Have you tried blowing on the fire really hard?" And it's provisions like that that kept the money flowing in. And, as their former governor puts it, Puerto Rico got hooked.
They were extremely attractive in the marketplace, and Puerto Rico actually got addicted, I would say, to it. And so it was a lot easier to just go out and borrow as opposed to making tough decisions.
Yeah, and that is absolutely true, but you were the governor for many of those years. So hearing you complain about addiction is like hearing Keith Richards complain about the Rolling Stones drug problem. It was you, Keith! You're the only Rolling Stone whose blood was a controlled substance. It was you! And there was one more quirk here, which made Puerto Rico a time bomb. Because unlike states, Puerto Rico cannot authorise what's called Chapter 9 bankruptcy, which is huge. Because think about that. If you are massively in debt and you can't declare bankruptcy, you are stuck. And this happened because of a tiny amendment to a law in 1984. And the crazy thing is, no one can say why it was written.
It's interesting to note that Chapter 9 applied to Puerto Rico from 1933 to 1984. And then mysteriously, for some reason, Puerto Rico was exempt from Chapter 9.
A provision was stuck into a larger bill with no explanation or debate.
There is no legislative history to explain why Puerto Rico was singled out.
He's right. So the next time your obnoxious friend tells you everything happens for a reason, you can simply say, "No, Dan, not the 1984 provision exempting Puerto Rico from bankruptcy protection, so shut the fuck up." Look, we even tried to find out ourselves why that amendment got attached. We knew Strom Thurmond had proposed it, so we asked an archivist at the library where his papers are kept to go through the relevant papers, and they came up with nothing, which might actually be the best case scenario there, because usually when it comes to Strom Thurmond, the answer to the question, "Where did this come from?" is either his testicles or fervent racism. So at this point, with massive debt that it's promised to pay ahead of government services and no access to bankruptcy, Puerto Rico was fucked. But wait, because we're only getting started here. Because 4 years ago, in an attempt to turn things around, they embarked on a disastrous plan to lure in wealthy individuals and small businesses by, among other things, exempting them from capital gains taxes, which, you have to admit, is pretty good rich people bait. It's right up there with tiny dogs in bags and big dumb round ice cubes. They're colder when they're round, you know. The government even created a video to sell mainlanders on moving, featuring a businessman talking in spectacularly condescending tones about how unexpectedly civilized life in Puerto Rico is.
What we found, first of all, was a thriving business community, established, solid, like the United States. In terms of family, I must say I was skeptical at first, but in the end, the island has everything you might need. Great possibilities. I visited schools and, wow, top level, in English. I saw living alternatives up to our standards, I felt safe. There's so many little treasures you want to explore, complemented with all the comforts, the necessities you and your family are accustomed to.
Oh, that level of colonial tone makes me cringe, and I'm fucking English. Dear, the buildings had roofs, the cars had wheels on them, but wait, they also had indoor plumbing and the printed word. But while those tax breaks were part of a plan to create 50,000 jobs in 18 months, a study later found they only directly created 5,800. That's 12%. If an ER doctor told you, congratulations, we got 12% of the G.I. Joe out of your rectum, you would not consider that a job well done. And while those who relocated have gotten out of paying around $420 million in taxes, Puerto Ricans have been suffering the effects of savage government cuts, including hospitals literally struggling to keep the lights on.
Puerto Rico's debt problem has gotten so dire, the Power Authority cut off a hospital that's behind on its bill. The Electric Power Authority did at least wait until surgeries were done for the day today before pulling the plug.
Oh, that's nice. They waited till surgeries were done. I guess it's only the people on life support that have to worry about the switch to bicycle-powered generators. Pedal faster, Luis, we're losing him! And with working conditions like those, is it any wonder that apparently at least one doctor a day leaves Puerto Rico? That is an attrition rate rivaling that of Grey's Anatomy. How have so many of you died? You work in a hospital. And the truly tragic thing here is Puerto Rico may soon need those doctors more than ever.
Health officials are worried as they expect the Zika virus to infect 1 in 5 people in Puerto Rico.
The island of Puerto Rico has already seen 450 confirmed cases of the virus that's been linked to severe birth defects.
So, hold on. On top of debt, industrial collapse, school closures, and a sudden influx of tax-dodging arseholes, now Puerto Rico has to worry about deadly mosquitoes. It's like the island is being hit with all the plagues that God felt were too thinky for the Bible. And this is clearly a moment where Puerto Rico could rightly cry out to its creditors for mercy. However, a lot of its creditors are now hedge funds, who traditionally thrive on this kind of chaos.
Hedge funds often invest in debt-ridden economies, buying up bonds at low prices and looking to flip them for quick profits. And Puerto Rico is their latest target. The strategy has earned them a reputation among critics as so-called vulture funds.
It's true. As much as 30% of Puerto Rican debt is now held by vulture funds. And if you are alone in the desert and see vultures perched above you, your first thought is never, oh, thank God, the vultures are coming to help. And these vulture funds have lived up to their name, with a group of them producing a report last year titled, For Puerto Rico, There's a Better Way, suggesting budget cuts like cutting excess Medicaid benefits and reducing the number of teachers on the island. So shaving money out of medicine and education is your better way. Well, at least have the intellectual honesty to then change the title of your report to, hey, Puerto Rico, fuck you, pay me. Now, the good news here is Congress is currently considering a bipartisan bill that would give Puerto Rico some breathing room to negotiate with creditors. And the details are still being worked out, but if this is done well, it could be a real help to Puerto Rico. Unfortunately, there is now a coordinated campaign to kill it.
Who will bail out Puerto Rico? Washington says you will. Retirement accounts crushed. A bailout on the backs of savers and seniors. Tell Congress, stop the Washington bailout of Puerto Rico.
OK, everything you just saw was bullshit. First, it's not a bailout. No one is suggesting a cash infusion. Second, that ad wasn't paid for by savers and seniors, but by the Centre for Individual Freedom, who spent nearly $2 million on ads like that. They are a dark money group, so it's impossible to say where that money came from. Hedge funds! Hedge funds gave them the money! It's impossible to say. Hedge funds! Impossible. Even these sad old people featured in that ad are bullshit because they're all stock footage models. And if you let the stock footage of the man with the mustache play out, he's not even sad because he starts fucking smiling. That's amazing. You can make him react to anything. Look, hey, stock footage man, you've been used in a manipulative attack ad. Oh, don't be sad. Let's get some ice cream. Oh, you know what? Bad news, they're out of ice cream. But they have cake. Pound cake, though, with strawberries. Oh, stock footage, man, you're America's greatest living actor. And this is not to say that regular bondholders have not been hurt. In fact, some Puerto Rican bondholders may have got the worst of this, thanks to one more quirk. Because some of the bonds were underwritten by the investment bank UBS, which sold them to one of its own divisions, essentially selling them to itself. UBS then offloaded those bonds onto Puerto Rican customers, even though its own sales force felt they were so risky, they came up with a list of 22 reasons not to sell them. And 22 is a lot of reasons to ignore. If a waiter at Bennigan's says she has 22 reasons she doesn't feel comfortable selling you the Cobb salad, you listen to her and you go across the street to a fucking Sizzler. Now, UBS says they did nothing wrong, and technically, they're right. I mean, sure, UBS should never have been able to sell those bonds to themselves. It's actually illegal to do that under the Investment Company Act of 1940. But, and I think you know what's coming by now, that doesn't apply in Puerto Rico, because apparently no laws apply to businessmen down there. I would not be surprised if in Puerto Rico, hedge fund managers somehow have the ability to fly due to some bullshit exemption to the law of gravity Strom Thurmond wrote up in the fucking 1980s. Look, the point is, 3.5 million Americans are facing a dire crisis right now, and the clock is ticking. Their next debt payment is due on May 1st, and in the short term, they need relief from hedge fund lawsuits and an opportunity to try to restructure their debt. And in the long term, we need to stop treating Puerto Rico like it's just a tax haven or a place to have terrifying sex with a stranger in a coconut mask. And instead, we have to start treating it like an island of American citizens whose fate is interwoven with ours. And look, there are certainly better voices than mine to speak on behalf of Puerto Rico. Luckily, there is someone with Puerto Rican parents and an amazing voice, and he is here tonight. Please welcome the great Lin-Manuel Miranda.
Yeah, my family's from Puerto Rico, the tropical destination, where you can spend your Washingtons, the spot where you vacation. A commonwealth with not a lot of wealth, a not quite nation, $70 billion topic of conversation. Hoping to God John Oliver's comical dissertation resonates with the Congress that got us in this situation, along with suicidal tax incentive declarations. Yeah, we'll pay your bonds first, close the hospital, fuck the patients. This is an island 100 miles across. A hurricane is coming and we're running up a loss. We got here through a million misguided loopholes that giveth and take away businesses and poop in our soup bowls. They crapped in yours, they crapped in mine. And somewhere down the line, Strom Thurmond's ghost busted a cap and a chance at Chapter 9. The great debate over statehood has to wait. That's Rose and Jack on the Titanic asking, when's our next date? The ship is sinking, we have to say impatient and matters. Then we'll figure out our Facebook relationship status. Will they or won't they? It's friends as Rachel and Ross. We have to help our island just 100 miles across. To recap, 3.5 million American civilians are on the hook for billions. Vulture funds are circling and lobbying for payout. There's nothing left to tax or cut. We're stuck. We need a way out. Allow them to restructure. There's no structure for what happens if you let this crisis play out. When May is less than a day out, it's nonpartisan. The hard part is in convincing Congress Puerto Rico matters, so their heart is in the fight for relief. Not a bailout, just relief. A belief that you can pass legislation to ease our grief. Paul Ryan, I'll come sing Hamilton at your house. I'll do-si-do with Pelosi. I'll wear my Hamilton blouse. Your citizens are suffering. Stop the bleeding. Stop the loss. Help Puerto Rico. It's just 100 miles across. Thank you. It's Alex Lackamore on keys.
Lin-Manuel Miranda, ladies and gentlemen. Lin-Manuel Miranda, that's our show. We're off next week. We'll be back after that. Thanks for watching. Good night.